Hello everyone, this is Solaris290, and I'm here today to give you my thoughts on Kingdom chapter 547, entitled Glaive's Lament. This was a fairly fast-paced chapter, but it was all for the better to have the focus purely on Shin and Gyou'un, as opposed to Heki, Shinsweiju, Yotanwa Rozo, Kankyo or Sen. And so, to start it off, we have Shin and Gyou'un confronting one another from last chapter. Gyou'un's men note that it's surprising that anyone could read Gyou'un's movements, let alone someone like Shin, who from their perspective is a fairly small-time commander. But nonetheless, Shin is standing his ground and immediately asks Gyou'un to confirm his identity as the man who once served under Rinshoujo of the Three Great Heavens. Before he can even finish that sentence, Gyou'un goes in for the kill. The resounding strike is one that Shin is just barely able to block, and it's powerful enough to not only almost knock him off his horse, but cause a severe crack in his armour. From that alone, nothing comparable like that he's had to face before, unless it was that of the likes of Gaimon, and therefore Shin's able to understand that this man is on that level, and that this likely is indeed Gyou'un himself. But Gyou'un himself argues that he was not testing Shin himself, but rather the glaive. Having heard from Miboku that one of the enemies amongst the Chin possessed the great Orki's glaive, Gyou'un struck in order to confirm that, and while he does note that it was Orki's glaive, he's not particularly impressed by Shin, the one who is wielding it. But before that, Gyou'un takes a rather fatalistic view of things. From his perspective, every encounter, every move he's made has all led up to this moment where he's confronting Shin. And here we get some nice insight into Gyou'un's motivation. Ultimately, while he stood on the battlefield and served under Rinshoujo out of loyalty, it was not just loyalty that motivated him to wage war on the battlefield. Ultimately, it was part of wanting to take down Oki, and indeed all of the great generals of Qin. To this, Shin and the others are undoubtedly shocked. But Gyou'un then, almost as if he's ignoring Shin, goes on his tangent of lamenting how Rinshoujo passed too quickly and was never able to reach his prime. Ultimately, as Gyou'un sees it, had Rinshoujo been able to reach the peak of his prime, the history of China as they know it would have been far, far different. The balance of power, the geopolitics, Rinshoujo's presence could have been a game changer had he lived for oh so much longer. To that, Gyou'un then makes the indication that if Rinshoujo had worked hand in hand with Rempa, and most likely Chosha, Gyou'un's remarks do speak volumes. We've seen the authority and the power of just one of Zhao's original Three Great Heavens, Rempa. Remember that back in Rempa's war, where he served as the de facto general of the Wei forces, he was ultimately never actually defeated. All of the strategies and tactics that Morgor came up with, Rempa was able to successfully outplay them. Ultimately, it was only really when Rempa understood the reality of the situation from a logistical and strategic perspective, he had to make what was effectively a tactical retreat. But ultimately, when Rempa struck Shin, Shin was able to understand from all of his authority, from all of his power, from all of his skill, that this was indeed a great general. But out of interest, the third of Zhao's original Three Great Heavens, Chosha. While we don't know much about Chosha, what is known is, in history at least, he did have a son, and that son was actually mentioned in Kingdom Story. Unfortunately, he was the General Chokatsu, the one whom replaced Rempa during the Battle of Changping, or Chohei as it's called in the manga, and of course the moment Rempa was replaced, and Chorkatsu, who was very hot-headed and rash, headed the Zhao forces, Oki immediately took him out, and that all led to Chorhei and everything that entailed from that. So, that doesn't speak very good things about Chorkatsu, but ultimately, hey, even if Chorsha was one of Zhao's three great heavens, it doesn't mean that his son would necessarily inherit that skill. But in any case, Shin cuts off Gyou'un's tangent by noting that he's someone clearly who's still obsessed with the legacy of his dead master. He's still clinging to his shadow. But nonetheless, Gyou'un still believes in his fatalistic perspective, and with that the two of them resume their clash. Ultimately, despite the strength of their convictions, it's clear that Gyou'un, with his accumulated experience, and his men having been constantly drilled even while he was off the battlefield, the He-Shin forces are struggling to make a breakthrough against them. Naki even has a moment where he jokes that he's probably regretting having transferred from Kunki's army. Honestly, I'm amazed that Naki even survived resigning from Kunki's army, given Kunki's policy on that. We also get a brief shot of Kyokai, who once again is able to note, she's able to almost feel that Shin and Gyou'un are clearly in a clash that will likely determine a large part of this entire war. So while Shin is clashing somewhat more evenly with Gyou'un this time, it's still clear that he's on the back foot. Of course, this goes back to Shin's prior struggles with using Orki's glaive in the first place. If you remember, Kyokai had noted that Shin was struggling to wield Orki's glaive, not only because of its weight, but because of having to adjust to a new weapon. And Shin indeed hasn't mastered that glaive, and Gyou'un himself is a lot faster and more skilled with his strikes. And here Gyou'un decides to not just inflict physical wounds upon Shin, but make sure that he can inflict psychological ones on him too. He notes that ultimately Shin, wielding Orki's glaive and engaging in combat with him right now, is mocking his master's skills. Ultimately, Gyou'un does not see Shin as someone who is even the slightest bit adequate as an inheritor, as a successor to Orki himself. Gyou'un can hear, as he sees it, cries of sorrow from that glaive, it crying out for a more suitable holder. While he does admire Orki's glaive, or at least what it represents, he sees Shin as nothing more than a mistake, ultimately nothing more than a lucky bystander who happened to be present at Orki's death in his wake, and from that, with all of the good fortune that he was able to obtain, to stretch out his hands and have Orki's glaive simply fall into his lap. And this is enough to trigger the flashbacks from Shin of Orki's final moments, his demise, and in this series of wordless panels, you can just see how much Hara's art has improved. But nonetheless, art shift or not, the panels, without any dialogue at all, still speak volumes of the raw emotion that Shin felt as these events were playing out before him, of Orki breathing his last and silently bequeathing the glaive to Shin. From that, it sparks enough anger, enough sorrow in Shin to revive himself. Orki's glaive didn't just fall into his lap out of luck, and that Gyou'un shouldn't dare open his mouth and talk as if he even knew a thing about Orki's demise. It's not as if he was there after all to feel the momentum of that occasion. And with that, Shin strikes into Gyou'un himself, and that's the end of the chapter. So, as I said, while this chapter was fast-paced, it was great to have the focus purely on Shin and Gyou'un, getting the insight into Gyou'un's character and motivations, fleshing him out a bit more, as I hope will happen with the next couple of chapters. It's unlikely that this is the end of their duel after all. But this was an enjoyable chapter. And so, give me your thoughts and comments below. This is Solaris290, signing out.